Welcome to Video Game Genres, where your host Gexup provides you information you need to know about a certain number of video games put in a category. And tonight's episode of Video Game Genre is 3D Platformers. Platformers. For those who don't know what a platformer or a platform game is, it's a video game genre categorized as playing as a character and make him or her jump to and from suspended platformers over various obstacles. Often a point A to B type of game. In the 80s through the 90s, 2D platformers were everywhere thanks to Pitfall that created the platforming genre in 1982, and Super Mario Bros. That evolved the genre into side-scrolling in 1985/86. Yep, there were thousands of platform games everywhere that were side-scrolling from right to left like a cartoon. In the 90s, the video game industry was evolving to 3D, and many consoles came to transform into 3D consoles, and many were just good for their time. Many developers took the concept of what was known as 2D platformers and transformed it to 3D platformers. Consoles like Sega Saturn had Bug and Clockwork Knights. Those types of games today are now known as 2.5D platformers. But 3D platforms really started to come along when the Sony PlayStation had released Jumping Flash in 1995. And a year later, Naughty Dog has released Crash Bandicoot for that system. Sega was about to put out Sonic Extreme with an exotic fisheye camera which was never released, but it needed to be reshaped to something that we have never seen before. Video games in 3D needed to something more immersive and actually feel like a truly 3D environment world. In 1996, Nintendo has released the Nintendo 64, and their killer app has revolutionized the history of gaming forever. And that game is Super Mario 64. With the innovative analog stick on the N64 controller, it has made the controls for Mario 64 flawlessly perfect, where you can control Mario 360 degrees around and have a great jumping mechanics ever in a video game, right in a fully breathing 3D world, in which a D-pad cannot perfect. Without Mario 64, video games would be very different than what they are today. With the influence of Mario 64, the 3D platform genre has expanded to a greater level, and the video game industry was headed for 3D for what it is today. So that's done with the history of 3D platformers. Let's talk about 3D platformers as a whole. 3D platformers took everything that was from 2D platformers and made them into a fully breathing world. Like every platform game, whether it's side-scrolling or 3D, the first thing that 3D platformers need are jumping mechanics, because you cannot platform without jumping, and they need platforms and surfaces to jump on. Yep, everything about platforming is about jumping the platform to platform, and sometimes have a wide open area to explore. They also have collectibles like coins and several other stuff that are scattered everywhere, and sometimes a line of them to indicate where you need to go, whether they're important or not. Many 3D platformers have home worlds where you start off in a big place where there are a lot of levels to select, and some of the 3D platformers that has no home world just makes you go through level to level. But I wouldn't consider all 3D platformers to be the same, because each of them have a different style of gameplay. I categorize them into three kinds of 3D platformers that I just made up. The first kind of 3D platformer that I made up is a typical point A to B type of gameplay, where they just select a level and all you have to do is start from the beginning all the way to the end of the level, and then you get to the next level of the game. Games like Crash Bandicoot, Sonic the Hedgehog, and Rayman are where I categorize them as point A to B type of 3D platformer. It's not so different compared to 2D platformers. The second kind of 3D platformers is what I call Mission and Collect, where you have a home world of levels to select, and if you select a level, you need to select one mission. You have a number of missions you can select in that level, but you need to do it one by one. This is different than the point A to B platformers, because Mission and Collect type of 3D platformers makes you do what the mission asks you to do, like getting to a certain area, collect specific items, destroy certain enemies, and so much more. Once you complete that mission, you are rewarded an important collectible, which is the main object of the game, and most likely they'll send you back to the home world and make you choose another mission in that level, go to another level and choose a different mission, or you can get a certain number of collectibles to advance to the next level, because without those collectibles you won't be going anywhere. Games like Mario, Gex, and Vex is where I categorize them as the mission and collect type of 3D platformer. The third kind of 3D platformers are another thing that I call task and exploration. These type of 3D platformers are similar to Mission and Collect 3D platformers, except when you have a level, they put you in a level where you have a non-linear world where you have many directions to go to and somehow end up to various tasks. Once you accomplish that task, you earn a collectible, and rather than send back to the home world and select another stage, you continue your exploration to find another task until you accomplish all the tasks and collect everything you need in that level. Sometimes you can't get all the collectibles because you need a new power or or ability from another level to obtain that power/ability and return to that level and collect everything. Task and exploration 3D platformers made every collectible important in the game. Not only main objective collectibles, but also minor collectibles that are just as important so that you can advance to another level. These type of 3D platformers made collecting everything a major task. I categorize Banjo-Kazooie, Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage, DK64, Bugs Bunny Lost in Time, and Jak and Daxter as being the task and exploration type of 3D platformer. And there are also 2.5D platformers that are 3D side-scrolling platformers like Little Big Planet, Klonoa, and New Super Mario Bros. But I don't really consider those to be 3D platformers. But again, not all 3D platformers are the same. Many developers use a 3D platformer and mix it up with another genre. Like Jak 2 and 3 evolved the series into a sandbox platformer. Ratchet & Clank, an RPG shooter mixed platformer. Jet Set Radio, an extreme sports platformer. Mirror's Edge, a first-person platformer. Sly Cooper, a stealth platformer, and many more that's very unique. I also want to address that even though that there are guns and shooting in 3D platformers, it is not a third-person shooter because your objective is to jump through numbers of platforms and you don't have aiming controls like a first-person shooter does. Even though Earthworm Jim 3D and Blasto are 3D platformers with guns, they are horrible to aim and target. But the Jak and Ratchet series did it right by making it easy to shoot enemies without trying too hard. That's the reason why blowing shit up in those 3D platformers are awesome as hell. I also want to address that platforming in the first-person view is not really that good, because you need to know where your playable character is going to land on. But anyway, if you're one of those gamers who really likes comedy in a video game, then there's no doubt that 3D platformers is your type of game, because they have a great history of having a lot of hilarious moments. It's true that the comedic moments made it too lighthearted and makes older gamers to alienate the genre, but seriously, there's something for everyone in the 3D platforming genre. Yes, there are too many kiddie games, but there are plenty of 3D platformers for the older audience like Jak 2, Ratchet & Clank, America McGee's Alice, and definitely Conker's Bad Fur Day. Here's another misconception. With all the level selecting in places that has nothing to do with the story and all the collecting stuff, there aren't any epic stories or character development in the 3D platforming genre that couldn't even match the work of literature like Final Fantasy and Metal Gear Solid. In some cases, like in Mario games where you have to rescue the princess all the time, it's kinda true. Wrong! There are 3D platformers like Jak 2, Ratchet & Clank series, and hands down Psychonaut that probably is some of the most well-written stories I have ever seen in the video game. And Psychonauts is very original and very well written that's more than just saving the princess. Fans of stories in video games, what are you waiting for? With all the awesome stuff in 3D platformers, are there any problems with them? Yes, there are. First being that when Mario 64 revolutionized gaming, other companies made poor Mario 64 clones of it. Games like Bubsy 3D turned out to be one of the worst games of all time. Second, most video game-based movies and TV shows are tossed in there, rushed, and plagues and abuses the 3D platforming genre as well as the 2D platformers. Third, as gamers are getting older and rarely any 3D platformers to appeal to the older audience, this made less good 3D platformers than what we used to have. For the guys who are over the age of 20 and haven't played any of the new 3D platformers that weren't in your childhood, just look at these games and tell me if you would love to play these games from beginning to end. That's what I thought. Fourth, many platformer series lost their touch of what they used to be and started to lose its touch of being a platformer, especially the rabbits who raped the Rayman series. But let's get to the best part that made 3D platformers my favorite genre. There's no denying it. Jumping through platforms to platform and surviving every obstacle throwing at you is just as fun as shooting down enemies. There are really good ones that are simple to play, but they are very challenging as you go along. So it's a genre with a lot of trial and error. Unlike other video game genres out there, there is no other video game genre that has so much creativity and originality as 3D platformers. I mean, what other video games in that category would let you transform to something else like in Banjo-Kazooie, or does movie parodies like Gex and Conker, or just as colorful as Jet Set Radio, or have a lot of comedic laughs? None other than 3D platformers. My overall conclusion of 3D platformers, though there aren't as many wide selection of them like back in the 90s and early 2000s, because there are older players who prefer to play shooters and other mature games. But in a way, 3D platformers are not exactly a dying genre. In 2007, 3D platformers made a comeback with epic releases such as Super Mario Galaxy and Ratchet & Clank Tools of Destruction that made huge sales and made numbers of game awards. Hell, Mario Galaxy made more success than Halo Halo 3 for crying out loud! Just when the gaming industry was going to get overshadowed by dark and edgy games, new platformer games came to the mainstream and dominated many of them, and many still waits for the attention that it deserves. I have to say 3D platformers are pretty much one of the most important video game genres because without Mario 64, games wouldn't be what they are today. Also, big titles today uses platforming elements such as Metroid Prime, Uncharted, Assassin's Creed, and so much more. 3D platformers are very influential, creative, and fun. And that's the reason why it's my favorite video game genre of all time. And I strongly recommend anyone to get into this genre. And hopefully we would have as many 3D platformers as much as we had in the 90s. So that wraps up our episode of video game genres. And if you like what you just saw, give a thumbs up, post a comment, and please subscribe.